King is the partner for Adidas here in Australia, looking after the retail stores. We're really excited to talk to you about what major global brand like Adidas is doing in this market and how they're forecasting and planning for the future. Also, we're going to be talking about streetwear, the future of streetwear, the future of collaborations with major brands like Yeezys and products that really have driven and pushed the market forward, and the great new concepts that Adidas are coming out with that we're going to start seeing here in Australia. So we're really excited to hear about this insight and your plans. Thank you very, very much for your time and participating in this series. Tom, you've been in retail for about 20 years and you have a background in technology as well. How do you think technology has evolved and changed the retail industry, particularly in stores?
Web 1.0, which was when I sort of started my career, that was very fundamentally e-commerce, very transactional, very singular. So you could actually buy a product. That was a real kick. And then basically that would be delivered to you. Again, a real kick. A lot of issues around trust. Those were the days when eBay had just started, Amazon had just started. In regards to stores per se, technology has made bricks and mortar stores a lot more efficient. There's been huge innovations around distribution, just-in-time delivery of stock management. You know, we measure traffic, we measure conversion, we measure price points, we measure units per transaction. So there's a lot of data. If you're not data-driven as a bricks and mortar retailer today, you're sort of struggling, you're fighting an uphill battle.
And what about if you're a online retail only?
So that's really interesting because I've been in both worlds. Online retail is very interesting. The fundamental problem with a lot of online retail is, in my view, the consumer's been educated that online is price orientated. So whatever goods you decide to sell online, you have to be price driven, no matter how strong your offer is. So in an online business, you fundamentally need a lot more volume to drive the same margins as opposed to a bricks and mortar store. And there is substantial costs in setting up the back-end infrastructure, in buying traffic, and many online models have a direct correlation to Google SEO and SEM spend. You've seen historically, there's a lot of online businesses that do go broke. So it's not a bulletproof model. And fundamentally, it's just as challenging as bricks and mortar, and even more so challenging in a way that the world's your competition. So when a shopper's, comes to a shopping center, they've got 100, 200 stores to look at, but then online, it's an infinite possibility. And fundamentally, if they know their size, they will price hunt.
You've been in retail for quite a long time. What's your philosophy around successful retailing?
At the end of the day, you've got to focus on the customer. Whether you've got a store, you've got an online presence, you have to deliver something to the customer that's in demand. A brand that they aspire to own, whether it's a product that they have a utilitarian use for, you really need to nail the customer and you need to nail the journey that they go on in terms of discovering your brand and purchasing the products that you have to offer. That's basically it. Doesn't really matter what format you're in. That is my fundamental philosophy of retail. Customer first, yeah. So if you look at some of our shoes here, these shoes are iconic Adidas, and they've been around for 50, 60 years. There's not a lot of technology in there. It's got iconic heritage. And what it is basically is people aspire, they identify, and it's still relevant. On top of focusing on the customer, it's about being relevant. If you're relevant to the customer, you will always win. And the amazing thing about the Adidas brand is, for 50, 60 years, regardless of what technology has happened, it is as relevant today as it was 50 years ago. Google's come, Amazon's come, they've all come, but when Adidas releases a exclusive shoe, there's still lines and there's still queues and we still sell out of those products.
Talk about being relevant and to your customer. You'll notice that I'm wearing an Adidas sweatshirt for this interview.
And it looks really good on you?
It's actually brand new. I bought it for the occasion and I'm also wearing these ones.
That's fantastic.
So out of respect and also being relevant to the
Of
video.
course.
Talking about a hype around product, Adidas are one of the first big brands to create massive hype, particularly with the Yeezys and the other collaborations.
Yes.
Can you talk us through how that all works and what goes behind that hype and why the hype's on that logo on that style shoe versus the other one? So who chooses that?
In terms of the exact, because I'm in retail franchise, but in general speaking, Adidas invests a lot of money in brand and marketing, in R&D development, and they're constantly looking for the next trends in performance, trends in technical, trends in social. So, Adidas was very early on the trend of sustainable product. And so it's really boils down to research, which the company spends a lot of money on in predicting future trends. But in terms of the success of the Yeezys, for example, that is just a combination of the crossroads where social media has basically crossed into brand, into commerce, and there is a model I run. It's basically the thinking of the 3Cs model, where you basically build a community, you build content around that, and then you'll have commerce. So if you have those three things working very symbiotically, you'll have a very successful business.
What's the current trend or product that Adidas is on right now at the moment?
As an industry, we're on trend.
Yep.
People are casual, the idea that you put on a suit and go to work to look respectable is pretty much out the door. And now we're in a COVID pandemic, that's even more so real and relevant. Brands like Adidas are really in general on trend because consumers are very casual in the way they look at things. And athleisure, as the segment is called, is all over. It's people are now very comfortable to wear their running tights, their Adidas jumper, and Adidas shoes to do everything from dropping off the school kids to having a meeting here as we are now to going home. So it's sort of, it is the uniform of life now, and it is very accepted. A good friend of mine said, who's a lawyer, and lawyers traditionally have the suit and the three-piece type thing going, that he once saw a photograph of the French president holding a cabinet meeting in an open neck shirt and a blazer. And his view is, well, if the president of France runs the country without a tie, he's not going to wear a tie. So in terms of the trend per se, Adidas is absolutely on the global trend of sneakers, of casualization. And then in terms of specific, footwear apparel trends, Adidas was very early on in terms of collaborations with music people and
Kanye West.
like Kanye West. I don't know how much I can say. He's gone pretty berserk in the papers recently.
Are you going to vote for him when he goes for...
Well, firstly, I'm not an American citizen.
You have a partnership with Adidas here in Australia. Adidas are constantly forward-thinking and trend-setting.
Yes.
What's the next retail concepts coming out of the Adidas brand?
So in terms of Australia, we're part of Adidas Asia Pacific.
Yeah.
The brilliant thing about that is that that includes the world's biggest retail playground, if you like, which is mainland China. So if you go to mainland China, where Adidas and Nike continually compete for market domination, every format is tried there. And segmented. So they'll have kids focus, they'll have mid-level, they'll have high level, they'll have sneaker focus, they'll have women's focus. So in terms of the one thing that may be coming down the track, I think the better way to think about it is Adidas is getting to the point where they're understanding their consumers and segments so clearly that they can actually customize the store and its assortment and its segmentation based on the most relevant consumer in that market.
So changing from market to market.
Absolutely.
So what's
Yep.
coming here in Australia?
So in Australia, right now, in terms of franchise, we've done originals only stores, which is street and fashion wear. We've also recently done what we call combined stores, which basically have the sports performance and the originals product in there. And that's really the preferred format for us going forward to combine the best of what the brand has to offer. And depending on the SKU or the customer, we can also further segment between maybe a higher tier customer, a more mid-tier customer, in playing around with that format.
And that changes from market to market, suburb to suburb?
Essentially, the core Adidas DNA is fixed,
Yeah.
but we can tailor the store depending on store layout, store size, and store demographics. The brand is constantly reformatting its formats. There's a new Originals fit out coming. There'll be a new women's inspired fit out coming. And being again, even though Australia is very small, being part of the APAC team or the APAC region, we get to experience or borrow from all the leading edge formats that they try over there.
You're obviously well traveled.
Yep.
How does Australia compare to the rest of APAC in relation to how we retail here?
Australia is really interesting. I would say in terms of sports, it is one of the most sophisticatedly segmented markets in the world for its size. Every sports segment, be it lifestyle, be it performance, be it street, is segmented into a retail concept. In terms of scale, of course, it's not as big as many markets in APAC, but in terms of segmentation and concentration and sophistication of how our market is segmented, it is very sophisticated.
And how do our shopping malls compare to the rest of the world or the rest of Asia Pacific?
I think high quality shopping mall concepts were pioneered. A lot of them were pioneered in Australia. Westfield with the Loews really pioneered all of them. So if you go to Asia, there's probably more scale. There's bigger, brighter, shinier malls. But in terms of sophistication of how they are run and professionalism of how our malls are run, I would say we're benchmarked globally.
Do you believe retail in the CBD will come back to what it was?
Absolutely, it has to come back.
Would you open a new store in the CBD right now?
Yes. In fact, we are as a brand, we are planning to open flagship stores in all the CBDs over the next 12 to 24 months.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Coincidence, I actually lease shops in the CBD.
Do you really?
I do.
We should talk.
We should talk. What a coincidence we're both here. Do I have a shop for you? Which concepts would you look at now in the CBDs? All of them?
The Adidas brand itself is looking for really nice CBD sites that we can do an original store, a women's store, a performance store, both in Melbourne and Sydney.
So you're pretty bullish about the Melbourne CBD, you're pretty bullish about retail, and you're pretty bullish about retail stores.
Yeah, so Melbourne CBD I am very bullish about because I know a lot of people are attracted to Melbourne. The tourists will come back, the students will come back. It's a beautiful place. That's why we're all here, that's why we live here. The idea that a retailer needs to pay the rent just because there's a heavy stick called a lease is going to be harder and harder as we go forward. And what actually needs to happen is we actually both need to understand each other's numbers better. The only way a retailer can survive and thrive is if we make money. As retailers, what we want to do is have more and more shops, and we want to have more and more shops that make money. And as landlords, they want to lease more and more shops to retailers that make more and more money. So it's really coming to a meeting of the minds as to what profitability looks like for a retailer. And in fact, for the retailer themselves to understand what is required for a landlord to actually invest substantial amounts of capital to get a business up and running. On one hand, I'm a retailer, but I'm also a shareholder of some of these REITs, and I get a dividend out of them. I completely understand where a lot of landlords come from, but the fundamental issue with what's happening here is retail's very variable. You can have a great month, a bad month, a great month, a bad month, and your lease cost is fixed, right? And so at some stage, which is what a lot of this pandemic's brought out, is the variable sales and the fixed numbers, it's not really a sustainable model. So I think there needs to be more of a hybrid working model where there is a fixed rent, and there's also a percentage rent where we share upside and downside.
Isn't that what you already have here in shopping centers?
We do have, but in terms of, I think that there needs to be more of it going forward.
So more of a variable, less of a fixed. Is that what you're saying?
More of a variable, less than the fix, or yes, absolutely. I think that's the future trend. In understanding where the landlord's coming from, that fix allows them to operate the center, build the center, pay for their cost of capital, etc.
And returns that they require.
Correct.
And your advice to any retailers or tenants, both SMEs and majors, who are dealing with landlords, in your experience, what is the best way to approach and work with your landlord in a long lease?
Most good landlords want their tenants to make money, and most landlords want their tenants to have high sales per square meter productivity, right? Which means, we can drive high sales. So in terms of my advice to people who are talking to landlords right now, it's about educating them about the situation, about the P&L, about what's needed, what sort of rents are sustainable, because there's really no point agreeing to a rent and then ending up in trouble in 3 months' time. So it's a lot of heartache. So there needs to be a big partnership in terms of landlords and retailers about educating each other about what needs to happen. On the flip side is, if you do well, pay the rent or pay more rent. Don't it can't only be one way. So what I like to do is to put deals together where there's a lower base rent and there's a high percentage share, because if I'm doing really well, I'm really happy to pay the landlord. And that's how you should be in terms of dealing with the landlord. Most of the landlords we deal with actually really support us in helping us set up these stores, which are very expensive. But again, it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
You can't expect a landlord to give you a lot of fit-out money or capital contribution if you drew up your concept in your kitchen dining table, brought a sign in there and said, look at this concept, please give me a substantial amount of money to fit out. These stores that we do they're like global designs. We buy the designs from all around the world. They've got hundreds of people working on them constantly. So when the store's actually delivered, it looks terrific. It attracts the customer. So it's give and take. And I think the important thing with landlords is that you're a bit more sophisticated than I want cheap rent and give me lots of money to fit out my store. We all have to be on the journey together.
As a major influencer and a leader in this industry, what change would you push for if you had that opportunity?
I think definitely the word consolidation has been thrown around a lot, and I think that's absolutely correct.
What do you mean by that?
So I think in many ways, from centers to shops to so on, with the onset of online, my theory is that I'd much rather have 30 or 40 really good stores in the best centers in the key segments all around the market than having 500 of which, 3/4 of them don't really work, they don't really trade, they don't really output at sales per square meter. And I think that's where it's going. I think there's a lot of states where there's just too many centers have been built, too many retail strips have been built. So I think the idea that you can have 25 multi-billion-dollar retail zones in Australia where we can all thrive and do well is something that I really like. That's the first thing.
What would you do with the other ones?
It's not that what I would do with the other ones. It's just I think those were repurposed, and it's not whether I want it or not. I think they are anyway. There's a lot of suburban malls that are now repurposing more into food malls, more supermarket malls, more essential services malls. So I think that's naturally happening already. And in terms of retail and consumer, there's no doubt that in terms of really powering the next wave of retail and e-commerce, it's to really fix the back-end infrastructure in terms of delivery, and that will open the next wave of retail innovation that I can order and get in an hour anywhere in Australia, that I can order food that's pre-packed or chilled, or it's just once you've opened up that back-end capability, a whole new wave of retail innovation will come out.